PlayStation 2 is perhaps the greatest console of all time, and it's also one that's great for emulation, so allow me to show you how to set up PS2 emulation on the AYN Thor. So first things first, we're going to be getting our emulator, which will be NetherSX2. I'll be using the Turnip driver edition, so you can grab this from Obtainium. If you don't already have Obtainium installed, then please make sure you refer to my original video where I took you through the first steps guide. So we're going to open up Obtainium, and then in our emulator section at the top, we're going to look for NetherSX2. So there are two different versions. The patch version was the original one that we were using on the AYN Thor, but we will be using the Turnip one. They're exactly the same, with the only difference being this one allows for Turnip drivers. So we're going to install it. So it's going to ask you to pick a package. So you want the one that doesn't say classic. The classic one is for older CPUs and GPUs. So once that's downloaded, we're just going to hit install. So if you saw my PS1 Duckstation tutorial, you'll know that I also showed you how to reduce the size of your games. So we're going to do the same thing. So if you don't already have it installed, on Obtainium, we are going to grab the CHDroid app, which is in your utilities. There it is. So we're going to install that. There we go. And we'll set this up later. So before we dive in, we're going to need to make sure that we have our BIOS file. So unfortunately, there is no region-free BIOS, so we are going to have to grab a couple depending on the region of the games we play. So we're going to go to our BIOS pack, which I covered in that initial setup guide, so do be sure to check that out if you haven't already. So here is that folder. So inside our system folder here, we're going to find all our BIOS files. So if we come down to PCSX2, which is a PC PS2 emulator, we're going to go to BIOS, and we've got absolutely tons of BIOS files in here. So which ones do we need? So what I'm going to do is on this side, I'm going to create a new folder like I did with the PS1, and I'm going to make a PS2 one just so I can demonstrate the best ones to get. So the ones we're going to want, they're right at the bottom of that folder, and it's the ones that end 2008-0220. So it'll be the 20th of February 2008, I believe. So we're going to want the A, which is the US one. We're going to want E, which is Europe, and we're going to want J, which is Japanese. Not too sure what H is. Holland, maybe? Not sure. So I'm going to copy those, and I'm just going to paste them into my PS2 folder just for easy access. So now we're going to jump into NetherSX2. So we've got a setup wizard very, very similar to the Duckstation one with a few minor differences. So we're just going to leave it on optimal and safe defaults. We're going to import our BIOS, so we're going to go to that folder that I just created. There we go, the PS2, and I'm just going to get 1, I'm going to get 2, and I'm going to get 3. It's going to ask you to pick one. I just do the USA by default, but you can pick whichever one of these that you require. For game directories, I'm just going to add my PS2 ROMs folder. There we are. I don't currently have any games in there yet, but we'll be grabbing one shortly. And that's it for the setup. So before we test out a game, we're going to want to set up some additional settings. So we're going to go to our burger menu at the side. We're going to start with our controller settings. So first up, we're going to go to our touchscreen tab. We're going to tap this controller view, and we're going to disable the touchscreen so we won't get the controller overlay on the screen. Also on this screen, for some weird reason, if we scroll down, there is a vibrate on press and a enable game vibration. So this is what will allow us to feel the vibration through the AYN Thor. Not sure why it's in the touchscreen menu, but it's here. Next, we're going to go to controller port 1. We're going to want a DualShock 2. It's the only option. Now for automatic mapping, we're going to have the same issues that we had on Duckstation, where because this is a Nintendo layout, a couple of the buttons are going to be back to front. So we'll do the automatic mapping. There we go. And we're just going to change our triangle, circle, X and square buttons. So triangle at the top, circle on the right, X on the bottom and square on the left. And that's all we need to do for the controls. Then we're going to swipe over and go to hotkeys. So I've covered hotkeys on different emulators already, but the only ones I use on the PS2 is the fast forward. So I'm going to enable it, I'm going to hold select and press my right trigger. That's my default for toggling fast forward. Obviously, if you want to do things like save states, then you are more than welcome to set your own hotkeys. So that's it for the controller setup. So now we're going to look at the app settings. So firstly, what we're going to want to do is enable patch code. So this is for if you use cheats, and it will also help for some games have built-in widescreen patches and de-interlacing patches. So that will allow us to use those. You can enable save state on shutdown just in case. It's a nice little backup. You can choose to enable or disable some notifications down here as well. I'm just going to leave those on the defaults. I'm going to head over to system. And then once we're on system, I'm going to make one small change. So if you're based in the PAL region, the original default frame rate for the PS2 was 50 Hz. So I'm just going to bump that up to 60. A lot of games had 60 Hz modes. I tend to use the US versions of the ROMs for that very reason. But if you do have to use a PAL ROM, then you can set it to 60 Hz. So for graphics, so by default, our GPU renderer should be Vulkan, which is what we want. Our upscale, I'm going to bump that up to 2.5. You do want it to match the resolution of the display, in this case 1080p. For bilinear filtering, I'm going to leave that on the default. The same for mip mapping and trilinear filtering. Most of these we're just going to leave on the default. For aspect ratio, I'm going to leave it on the auto standard because, like I said, we're going to enable these widescreen patches and these no interlace patches. So if they do exist, then it will render in widescreen, and if they don't, you don't have these big stretched out blocky looking visuals. If you're interested in using shaders, then you can add one here. You can add a CRT shader. I don't tend to, but you can have a play around. You can also use these options here to load texture packs. I won't be covering texture packs because I did look at it a while ago, and I found that because of the nature of upscaling and it's only a small screen, there's no real benefit to using texture packs on a device this small. Just stick with upscaling. For audio, we can just leave those as is. For memory cards, we're going to want to create a memory card folder. So similar to how we did on the PS1 emulator, Duckstation, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to create a memory card, but rather than picking a size, we're just going to pick a folder. And I'm just going to call this one PS2. I'm going to create that. And then I'm going to come down, and where it says card enabled, the card name for memory card 1, I'm going to pick that folder, and I'm just going to disable the memory card 2 slot because I don't need it. For our game list, if you have your games on multiple folders, then you can add any additional folders you want here. I just have the one, so I'm going to leave that as is. If you ever need to change BIOS, you can just come to this menu and tick the one you need. Now for achievements, I'm going to recommend that you enable retro achievements if you have an account, and if you don't, I'm going to also recommend that you get one because they are wonderful. I'm going to enable hardcore mode, which disables cheats, saves and slowdown. I'm going to leave everything else as default, and I am just going to log in. So once you've logged in, you're going to get this little token generation time, and you can view your profile from inside the app as well. It'll take you to the website. So for the advanced options, we're not going to touch much in here, but I will just talk you through them. So with this turnip driver version, it will actually already pull the turnip driver for us, so we don't have to manually find one like some other emulators require. If we scroll down, there's a lot of quite advanced features on here, nothing we really need to touch, but I just want to point out, if you're someone who plays pixel games, I know that there's some classics out there that are pixel based, then you can also enable integer scaling and screen offsets and overscan. However, for the most part, I'd say leave these off. So I've got myself a game ready to test. I have got God of War 2, so it's currently in my download folder. So what I'll do is I will just press and hold using Solid Explorer. I'm going to press these 3 buttons and I'm going to extract. And what this will do is it will just extract it into this folder. You can also use Z-Archiver if you have that installed, but as this is just a single file inside a zip file, I'm just going to use this one. Okay, so there we are, that's all unzipped. So I'm going to open my ROMs folder, scroll down to PS2, and then I'm going to press and hold, and I'm just going to drag it over. So you can see that it's almost 8 GB, which is pretty chunky. So we'll give the game a boot, and then I'll show you how to compress the game so it runs just as flawlessly at a fraction of the file size. So we'll open up NetherSX2, and there we are, we have our God of War 2. So if we give this a tap, you can see that it's enabled a widescreen patch, so this should render widescreen without me having to change the aspect ratio. And there we are, we're in the game. So we'll just quickly boot through. Little tip for you, if you've enabled a fast forward hotkey, you can skip unskippable cutscenes by just fast forwarding them. So here we are in game. So you can see it runs absolutely flawlessly. And there we go. So just before we convert the file to a smaller file size, I just want to show you, if we go to our download covers option, we can press this, and if you want 3D covers, you can keep the top line, or if you want the standard 2D covers, you can just delete that top line. But so I'm just going to delete that top line, and what this will do is it will automatically fetch the artwork for us. This is for if you don't intend to use a front end and you just want NetherSX2 to be your main point. So if I just delete that and press download, we've got a lovely God of War cover there. If I press this little button at the top, we get a grid view, which is much nicer. So you can have a really nice looking library inside the emulator itself rather than relying on a front end. So for conversion, so we're going to go to CHDroid, which we downloaded before. We're going to add a new folder. So we're going to go to our ROMs folder, our PS2 folder, and we're going to use that folder. So we'll allow that, and then we're just going to press convert. It's going to ask you some questions. So for this configuration setting, even though the game is technically a DVD, we are going to leave it on CD. The reason for this is the DVD file conversion came out after NetherSX2. So if you convert something to a CHD that's a DVD format, it won't work. If you use ARMSX2, which is another PS2 emulator, which is still in quite early days, so I won't yet cover it, you can use DVD, but we're just going to leave it on CD type. So you can also delete the original, however, I wouldn't recommend doing that just in case something goes wrong. And just before we start, do make sure that you've set your CPU to high performance, because this does speed things up a little bit. And then we're going to hit start. Make sure you consent. So you can see, there you go, it's running through the conversion. This will take a few minutes. This is quite a chunky game anyway, even by PS2 standards. I believe it was on a dual layer DVD originally, so it's double the size. So this will probably take about 5 minutes or so, but we'll compare the file sizes at the end. You can see that we have saved almost 1.8 gig, which might not seem like a lot, but you imagine if you've got 100 games, you could save hundreds of gigabytes over time. If this video helped you out, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe. It does really help the channel. I've got plenty of guides about the AYN Thor and plenty more to come. So make sure you subscribe to RetroPup for all your AYN Thor needs. See you next time.